Great, thank you. Well, as people grab the last piece, I have the honor of introducing our speaker tonight, Phil Warbasse. My name is Judy Eddington. I'm the president of the Friends of the Stone Church. And on behalf of the board, welcome. Really happy to see you all here. From the beginning of our work together, Phil Warbasse has been in the thick of things, and we are so privileged that he has been. Phil's a board member, but for tonight's talk, the important thing to know, as most of you do, is that Phil is an architect. Phil works on historic structures, and over the years, he has worked with many organizations like ours, small nonprofits, but also municipalities and individuals on projects that have a preservation bent to them. So that means Phil's expertise has been absolutely essential to everything we do here. Phil's been in a position to be in this building and to be aware of what the needs are. And if he knows that he doesn't have the expertise to address them, he knows how to get the people who do and form relationships and good working relationships so that all inures to our benefit. Throughout the years, Phil has brought his professional expertise to us on a pro bono basis. So I can't tell you, and I'm sure you know what value that has been for our organization. I really can't overstate that everything you're going to learn about tonight in terms of what's happened with this building and the work that's been done here really couldn't have happened without Phil's expertise and Phil's generosity. So thank you, Phil. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you all for coming tonight. When we get around to the end of the talk, this is the show and tell box. It's filled with chunks of mortar that have been spit out of the building by alcohol free spots like the way will be explained. Friends of the Stone Church began work with the Hardwick Historical Society, and Barnes is here tonight, in 2014 to stabilize this historic landmark. This is one of 126 buildings that are on the National Register within the Gilbertville Village National Historic District. Through the help of grants from the Massachusetts Historical Commission and the Massachusetts Cultural Council, Mass Development, and the astonishingly consistent support of community and donors, we've raised about $570,000 for this part of the project to date. What's left to be done is about another $317,000 for the outside of the lantern level, that's where the dormers are, plus another $90,000 to finish the outside of the stone spire. In 2016, our structural engineer estimated that the total cost for tower repairs, if we had all the money at once, would be about $700,000 to $900,000. So we seem to be on track, even though it's been spread out over about 8 years of the 10 that we've been involved. This is a boulder about the size of a Volkswagen. It's out in the woods. Probably 200 years ago, there was a hairline crack developed in the boulder, and in the winter, when the moisture got in there, expanded the stone, pushed it apart a tiny bit, dirt and silt get in there, and never closed tight again. So for 200 years, that joint's been working in the winter, and it's pushed the stone apart, and then, in this case, I think the ground was a little soft on the left piece, so it went downward. This is the same action that affects all stone buildings. This is a beautiful church in New London, Connecticut, the First Church of Christ, built in 1840. The tower is 150 feet tall, it's higher than ours. When this was designed by an architect named Leopold Eidlitz, who's famous in his day. I think he did maybe the New York State Capitol and many other famous buildings. Soon after this church was completed, in 1840, he wrote to the building committee and he said, the tower stonework is so shoddy, you should take it down and make the contractor take it down and rebuild it. The of that. So to mitigate the problem, the church had iron rods run through the stone from front to back and side to side with plates on the outside. You've seen these on, maybe you've seen them on brick warehouses, that kind of building. It lasted for 184 years, but without any serious maintenance. Water got into the stone and the mortar joints, just as it has on ours, and it caused the stone to move, and probably the plates corroded enough that probably one of the plates let go in hard. Watch the tower. Watch the tower. Wow, 3 seconds. So if you go online and just search for New London Church collapse, there's an engineer in Florida who's taken apart a lot of videos and step by step, and has some good theories about why that one collapsed. All the stone in the front suggests that the tower failed in the front, everything blew out toward the front, and then the tower went back, as you saw, and tilted a little bit to the left and took out the whole left wall and about 2/3 of the roof. This is it the next day. They had a crane in there taking down the 2 left towers, left and right towers, and you look at the video today, the whole back of the church has been demolished. So our church has been closed from 2010 to 2014 as the rising cost of heating oil became too much for the parish. And Friends of the Stone Church posted our initial damage assessment by structural engineer John Blackney, looked at these cracks. All the yellow and red are on the image, not on the stone. Stone shear cracks have come down right through that leftmost line of crack. We discovered something today, that a laser pointer works on the wall but not on the screen. In 2016, stabilization began, designed by John Watney. The Joseph Mazza Company won the bid, and first work on the tower, they made 26 3-inch diameter cores through the 4-foot thick walls, and the cores go from the base of the stone all the way through almost the back of the inside finished stone that you don't see because it's covered with lath and plaster. They assembled stainless steel rods called pins, and each of the assemblies has 3 plastic tubes you see in the left picture for the injection of a structural bonding grout. And if you can imagine, it's like white pudding. If you ever mixed up plastic Paris at home for repair, that's kind of what it looks like. And it's injected under pressure, first through the 2 small tubes to seal a mesh bag at the far end and the near end of that assembly, so that it locks everything in place. And then through the big tube, they inject grout and they watch the pressure gauge on the tank. When it gets high enough, they know that it's taken all of the candidate and stop pumping the grout in. But that's to fill in all the voids in that rubble stone you see in the right-hand picture, where water is leaking in for 150 years has eroded a lot of the line of the mortar. Those are the white streaks you see on the outside of the tower. The combination of keeping water out by repairing the mortar joints on the outside and sealing the interior spaces with that adhesive bonding grout and the steel rods, stainless steel pins, will stabilize the tower structurally for probably another 50, 60 years at least. After the injected grout cured around those steel rods, the shear cracked face granite stones were carefully removed to view the extent of the deterioration inside. You can see where they've taken up the stones. You can see into the building partway. And the right-hand picture, you can see where the stone below the one that's removed has been pushed out by the weight of 130 feet of stone on top of it. After all that work was done, each one of those cores that they took out was numbered. They cut a 2-inch piece off the face of each one, and we put it in the hole that it had come from. They custom matched the mortar to blend with the stone. And when you go outside in the daylight and look at the tower, you'd be lucky to see maybe 6 of the 26 cores. Some of the stone that had split, they repaired with epoxy, and they reset it to the original position. Then any exposed gray epoxy that you see in the picture is carefully ground away, so that what you see when you look at the tower now is just a thin line. August of 2017, we're ready for a crane survey of the tower exterior with the structural engineer, Steve Quinn, who's here tonight, Bill Parrott, his helper, and Dan.
That's me, but I wasn't there.
Dan wasn't there. He's with the two guys tonight. So that was the beginning of this adventure. Up on the basket, which is about half the size of that table, we have 3 guys in there. We spent a couple of hours twice going down the face of the wall, taking pictures. And on the second trip, John went up and opened some of the joints to see where the joints and mortar that had turned to sand. He scrubbed some of that back to see how far back in that 10-inch joint was still solid. And in most cases he found, you see where his hand is, that's about 4 inches into a 10-inch joint. So the stones are still held together somewhat by the mortar that's in there. The original mortar was basically a blend of lime and sand. Through more than a century, water seeped into the stonework, and in places it dissolved some of the lime, leaving sand. And that's the white smear that you see in many places on the outside of the building. In some locations, the 10-inch joint had eroded to sand for about 4 inches, leaving about half of the mortar still holding the stone in place. So part of the repair work, all the stone joints were what they call jet washed, flushed out with water under pressure to remove the mortar that had turned to sand and leave a clean joint. Then the joint was solidly packed with a darker mortar right up to within about 1 inch of the surface. And that last inch was then packed with the tan-colored mortar that matches the original. Picture on the left, you can see the joints have been cut back deep, and on the right-hand side is a pressure pot. The red hose is that white pudding route inside the pot, and then it's pumped through spaces along the joint work to fill up the spaces in behind. And they can sound the stone with a hammer, and they can tell from the sound of it where the stone has become detached from what's behind it. Here's Joseph Mazza Company, the steel staging along the front of the belfry level. Other picture, you see a couple of Mazzo's guys telling Mary what's going on with it. Mary was brave enough to go up to each of the levels. All the wood windows are in fair condition. Before the invention of flexible, very long life exterior caulking and sealant, the gap between a wood window frame and a stone would have been packed with the same mortar that they used between stones. And over a century, most of that original mortar has detached and fallen away, so you have gaps around the window frame. You can see where people in the past have tried to fill the gaps with spray foam. Over a century, most of the original mortar has fallen out, so the repair by NASA included filling that gap with a 50-year flexible sealant and then primer and finish paint. On the left side, joints in the sloping stones had a different kind of repair. The new body mortar with dark mortar that you don't see, that was brought up to within about 1 inch of the surface, and then that 50-year sealant was put in there, and a T-shaped lead strip was pressed into it. So those joints will be watertight for probably 50 years. All four of the wood belfry louvers deteriorated at the sills and gradually kind of slumped downward. When you're up on the staging and you look at those louvers, there are bolts that somebody retrofitted probably in the early 1900s. They go through the original half pillars that are part of the louver. They go right through into the inside structure of the frame to try and keep it from going any lower. So we didn't have enough budget to replace all four louvers and rebuild them, but NASA did a fabulous job of taking the louvers apart. We'll see in a minute. But before they did that, they put a stainless steel cable all around the belfry up near the top, and those turnbuckles allow the cable to be tightened at each one of the four faces, just to hold it in place, not to pull anything. More examples of joint deterioration. On the left side, the original joint of about 10 inches, 5 inches of mortar had just turned to sand. In the middle, some of the old repair mortar that was just a surface patch failed to stick to the stone, and that big slug, we see a lot of those in the show and tell box. In some cases, a piece of mortar like that is only held from falling down to the ground by a little bit of dried up caulking that was put on in the probably 1980s. At the right side, you can see an open joint that shows gray plastic back rod. Actually, the laser pointer worked. Below, near the bottom of the picture, that joint had opened from about finger width to about 1.5 inches. And backer rod is like a swimming pool noodle. It comes anywhere from finger size, quarter inch maybe, up to, in this case, 1.5 inches. When the repair work in those days was done in 3 sessions by a guy in a bosun's chair, which basically, you can imagine a swing set, but instead of the staging, you've got a rope that goes up 130 feet to the top of the tower, and there's a guy on a plank dangling on that rope. He pulls up a batch of mortar from the ground that somebody mixes for him, sloshes some water into the joint, cleans out the best he can, and then packs mortar in there. Well, if the mortar is washed out for 5 inches, he doesn't have that much mortar with him, so he's got to massage it so it fills the surface of the crack, and in many cases, it doesn't make a good bond. Picture on the right, this is the window that you see in the front of the church. When you see it from inside, it's got the double piece in it. It shows, it's typical of the condition of just about all of the windows. In this case, the wood frame seems to be sound under the chipped paint, but many other of the window and door frames need extensive repair. Inside the belfry, where the bell is, the bell's on an elaborate frame, and the whole floor of the belfry is sheathed in copper. In those days, I don't recall most of the seams were soldered, but they were folded under and hammered flat. Around the perimeter, there's a gutter that's shaped to carry water that blows into the louvers, and there's one small hole that drains that out. Whereas somebody modified that in the past so that the water that came through the louvers into the belfry, went straight down through a pipe right into the closed cellar, the 10 by 10 foot cellar of the belfry. And when we went down there to see what was happening with that cellar, all the wood framing was covered with water droplets. And you could see the framing had rotted so many times that there are at least 3 different attempts to reinforce it with wood, none of which is pressure treated, by the way, so that's probably a 1960s repair, the newest one. So as part of the repair work, a new pipe was cut, and they installed a new one that comes out through a little stainless steel pipe that comes through the wall of the building. In the right-hand picture, you just see that little round dot, because it's so well camouflaged, it's not visible at all. Joint repair above the belfry louvers. You can see the joints have been cut out, they've been jet cleaned, and they're being packed with the bonding mortar to within about 1 inch. The spray bottle that you see hanging on the staging, they use that to keep the mortar wet as it's packed in there. And then what they do the next step, they put in the tan mortar, which you see on the right, spray that a little bit just to keep it moist until it can be allowed to go through the proper weather curing process. On the left side, you see a stress fracture, that crack that comes up from the joint. There really isn't any risk with that joint. It's just, I think, from the pressure of stone on stone, do not put your hand on the touchpad. So the base of the louvers looked like this when we took it apart, when NASA took it apart. The three pieces on the left side with the original structural framing that has just rotted and squished down into nowhere. And in that left-hand picture, you see a little bit of copper flashing that was original, but it didn't come up far enough. It should come out of the stone to carry water out of the belfry and away from the wood frame. This is the beginning of Nazo's repair. They took apart all the rotted wood at the base of the louvers, and they put in the synthetic material. On the right-hand picture, some of the original wood has been repaired with epoxy. And then this is the back of the tower facing the cable, the wire-like thing that you see coming down. That's a lightning protection cable that carries protection from the copper ornament on the top of the spire down to ground. The two pipes that you're sticking out, those are carrying water from a drain in the floor of the lantern level. We'll get to that a little bit later. The sister church tower, this was designed by the same architect within a year or two of this one. That spire was struck by lightning. And that's kind of the reason that this church hurried up and put in the lightning protection. The tower, they couldn't afford to rebuild that in stone, so that was done with a new steel frame and slate shingles. That, if you look up that stone church online now, the Brattleboro Stone Church, it's now a bar. This is the north wall. On the left side, you see the sloping stones that are part of the transition from the square tower to where it begins to turn into 8 sides. So the dormers are on 4 of the sides, and then in between you have this intermediate panel of just stone working up to where the spire is fully 8-sided. Then as explained before, these are several areas where sloping stones were cleaned out, packed with mortar up to near the surface, and then sealed with the lead T-shaped pieces. Here are some more of those structure cracks. In this case, it appears that one stone is supposed to be laid in mortar on top of the one below it, not only for the joint ceiling, but because that mortar acts as kind of a cushion so you don't get hard stone on hard stone. And in this case, it doesn't seem that mortar has gone away, but the weight of all that stone on top of this one has caused a shear crack. That's not a dangerous crack, but there are several of them along the course of the tower. Here's another one. You see that faint crack on the left side, and then in the right-hand picture there's another stress crack that goes up. You can imagine probably hundreds of thousands of pounds of stone that all of this, the lower levels carry. Where there's a lime wash on the side of the building, in some places it's more than just a streak. It's almost a porcelain-like coating. So on some of the work in the belfry, they have this tool that's compressed air operated. It's like a whole group of stiff wires, and when they activate it, the wires chatter against the porcelain buildup, take it away, but they don't hurt the stone. This is work in progress. Mary up on stage again, and one of Nazo's finest doing the work. And the right-hand picture, you see structures north, intern on the left, John Watney in the middle, and Russ Berg, the VP of Nazo Company, on the right. And Nazo's people, including Russ Berg was often on the project, just checking in on general conditions. And Ken Hall, who I believe is the gentleman on the left with the mask on, Ken is a superstar. He's the one guy, any of you who went to the gala, met Ken and his wife. Ken is the one guy who's been there on the tower, on the staging, and in the dormer level through all of the phases. A true expert. For consistency of repair procedure, work uses some premixed products that are formulated to match the original mortar color with the added strength of a little calculated amount of porcelain cement in the mix to give it a little more strength. When you're inside the tower, this is climbing up inside the tower, going to the dormer level, looking down from a very rickety ladder on top of the belfry louvers. And those boards, you see the ends of those boards. I believe that's temporary framing that they put in place when they set the stones. And once the stones are locked in place with mortar in the 1870s, then they didn't need the wood framing, but I think that was used to hold the rough framing in place for attachment of the tower louvers. Then we get to the exciting part, inside the lantern level, the dormer level. Now you have 8 faces, the 4 with the dormers and the 4 in between, and every junction has a crack. In some cases they're thin, and in this case, looking toward the front of the building, toward Main Street, they're a little bit frightening. So John Wannabe, the engineer, came up with a plan to design 2 tension frames. It's basically steel installed at 2 levels inside that dormer. And then those pieces are all tied together, as you'll see. They're all tied together with stainless steel rods, and when everything is connected, then they'll supervise how much the connecting rods get tighten, because you don't want to pull on the stone, you just want to hold it and tighten enough to hold the stone in place against any thermal movement of the stone, minute movement until it can be worked on the outside. So this is tension frame number 1. This is the one that, if you could put yourself in that tower now, this is about halfway across, halfway up the height of the windows and louvers. The second one is higher, it's about 4 feet above, and the fascinating thing is when you look at each of the dormers, you see that top stone, the hood stone, and then below each one, there are the next 2 down with the red dots. He was only able to, the staging only goes up to the front of the building for this phase. So Ken was able to measure just the front of the building to locate where he needs to drill from the inside to within up to 4 inches into each one of those 2 stones, which you can't see from the inside because there's other stone between that one and the interior. Then you can see from the 2 different dormers that they're not all the same, but he needs to translate those measurements to each of the other 4 that he can't see and do that backwards from the inside. So out of the 16 holes they had to core, this is the high ring, he was only off by a couple inches on 2 of them that had to be redone. Up inside the tower on the left side, those are the 4 cores on one of the faces. You can see the cracks going up to it. And an older picture on the right-hand side, you see the big crack that's partly behind the ladder. That ladder, by the way, was intentionally left in the tower in the 1980s, and we've been told by Kevin Leacock, who does a lot of work around here, that as a teenager he worked on a bosun's chair doing a lot of the outside patch pointing. He said the ladder was used to get up and drill 1 hole through high up in the spire so they could thread a rope that would hang the bosun's chair. I don't understand all the details, but I think Steve Quinn could probably explain that later on. Here's one of the first pieces of steel installed. Each one of these 4 pieces of steel was made with no holes in it because every one has to be custom drilled inside the tower. And we're going to be looking at a lot of these pictures, but I wish there was some way that I could explain to you that this part of the tower is only 9 feet across, and they have to fit a staging inside of it that measures 3 by 3, and they have to work around the space. The staging is on rollers that can be locked, so they can move it back far enough from the wall so that the coring tool will have enough length to reach the stone. So it was a constant process of 2 days to make this core, and then take all the bracing apart that blocks the staging so it won't rock while they're working. Take everything apart, and then move the staging, position it accurately, and then put in reattach stabilizers so that it holds still. So each one of these pieces, they have to lift it up on this temporary structure they call a table, put it in position, tip it on its face, it's about 150 pounds, mark the back where the pins come through the wall from grouted stainless steel rods that come almost all the way through the wall. Then drill the hole, and then put the steel back, and the two ends of this level here that are 45, they have to drill 2 locations, one from the outside plate and then another one from the inside, because that wall, the stainless steel pin that comes through at an angle, has to be located exactly. So that's too much information, I think. But looking up inside the cone of the tower, you see that piece that runs crossways. That's a steel beam that still is holding up the stub of a weather vane shaft. And we're guessing that since Emily Bancroft's history of Hardwick says that around 1910 they had to take down the spire because it was leaning, and they rebuilt it. We're not sure how far it was rebuilt, but it was at least that far. So the steel beam was obviously put back as part of that work. The weather beam must have been removed later. Here's more pictures of some really chilling cracks. In all of the years that we've looked up there, each time we go up it looks worse and worse, but when we compare the computer pictures, there does not appear to be any change at all so far. Scaffolding inside the lantern level, the upper steel reinforcing has been bolted in place against the wall. You see orange foam that they put around the outside temporarily so that when they put grout in behind it, between the steel and the wall, it won't pour out. Then later on, they remove the orange foam, and it looks like this. They put a little bit of mortar on the top of the grout that they put behind it, just so that any water that weeps down the wall won't go behind and possibly seep in between the grout and the steel. Just a little detail of what happens at the end of the bolts. You can hardly see in this picture, but there's a little curved piece, thin curved piece right below the bolts and nuts. That's a piece of spring steel. So when the structural engineer directs how much to tighten those bolts, they'll be looking with a torque wrench to see when the tightening is enough. Here is the last day of work when NASA was finishing up for as far as we can go now. This is the last installation work until funding is raised to continue with the outside lantern level repair and the spire. So the connecting steel rods, in this case we're looking at the top set. And as you look down, you can see the lower level assembly where the stainless steel connecting rods go across the window. Those will be tightened in coordination with scheduled continuation of the outside work. So that may not even be tightened until the outside work has enough funding to go ahead. This is the reason that the next funding is now critical, because the outside of the lantern level and the spire above it still let in water. If you go up in the lantern level in heavy rain, you can see it in places dripping through, and in other places it comes through and it'll seep through a joint. There are a couple of other places around the dormer windows. You see how bad this is the north dormer. A couple of details from the circle locations. See how bad the joint work is. And then I came out of a visit with Ken Hall, and one of the days they were working, probably early May, and as I came down, a guy on a motorcycle pulled up. Well, he's an old timer who travels around making drone videos. He did one of the music camp in Hardwick before it was demolished. He did one at Mitchellwog and Petersham on the common Petersham before that was torn down. And it was just serendipity. He said, oh, I do drone videos. Can I take a video? Absolutely. So he did a drone video, which you can find online. It's a link. But these are some of the pictures that we took as stills, working from the top of the dome up the tower. And these are just about a half dozen of the worst ones. This is the northwest face of the tower, just at the top of the dormers. This is dead on north, and this is working toward the back of the church. This is the next face, northeast. Closer look at the northeast, you see all the open joints in rough condition. And then going a little bit higher, this is the south face facing the town hall. More open joints, see up near the top. The wire on the right-hand side, that's the lightning cable. And then this is a belt course of granite that's up near the top, and that's a little bit scary. And finally, we're back to the church in New London, Connecticut, and the day after it collapsed. So there we are. That's the reason that we're looking for funding to go on to the next level. There's an example, and I think Mary can explain about the financial condition. And there we are. This is Steve Brewer and the cast of Bosie. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, I'll do what I can. I guess it's yes.
Well, you mentioned several cracks that were not dangerous. Why are they not dangerous?
Basically because they're not supporting serious stone up above. I mean, they all are part of the building process, but there's enough stone behind them and around them and adjacent to them that those particular ones where you see just the hairline crack, they're not going to flush out like the stones that we found at the base of the tower originally.
And they're not being filled?
They can inject epoxy into the crack. I think they're so thin that you can't really fill them with mortar, but they could inject epoxy into the crack, and that would close it up to weather, and it does lock the stone together.
And how you say that this repair should last 50 years, how can those overseeing the life of the building make sure that it does last 50 years, and what maintenance and preparatory work is necessary to keep 50 years from now there being another disaster? So
Right.
how can you maintain so that it's just a continued maintenance rather than...
What happened to get to the present condition was really 150 years of almost no maintenance to the stone. The tuck pointing that I described that we done is really surface repair. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a very bad cut. It keeps the water out as long as that plug holds. But then when the plug deteriorates or loses its grip and a hairline crack opens up between that patch and the stone, water gets in there and it starts the whole process. So the answer to the future from here is that it really needs to be inspected closely. I would say at least 10 years, every 10 years. The church in New London that collapsed, there's a lot of follow-up to that you can find online if you're curious. But one of them is there was a structural engineer in New London that did a survey of that tower in 2011, and most of their focus was not on the stonework. There's one line there and it says, oh, the stone is in generally good condition. So in our case, we definitely would advise, even the slate roof that was extensively repaired this past summer, inspected periodically by somebody knowledgeable. And in our case, this would be a structural engineer to look at it closely, inside and outside. All of the work that we've done so far on the outside is to reinforce the structure of the tower. But the inside, if you go up inside the tower from the balcony, you step up into the first level of the tower, which is not scary. You can see that the original wood framing, really every one of the floors, from the first floor, that intermediate level above the balcony, and all of the levels up through the belfry and the lantern level, every place where they originally built wood framing into a pocket in the stone, it's all rotted. And you can see that probably half a dozen times over the decades, reinforcing has been put in place. Somebody puts a 4x4 on the floor, and they put 4x4s up to another one under the floor framing of the level above it. So I wouldn't do any heavy jumping up and down on any of the levels inside the tower. Did that answer the question? Okay. There's another question in the back. Judy?
Yeah, there's scaffolding up now. What more can be done while that scaffolding is up? And how much money is needed to do that work?
We had talked with Russ Burke from Nassau and Ken Hall. And Ken Hall, I was up there one day when Ken and I discussed that. The staging that's already up there could be extended a little bit to the right and a little bit to the left, so they could theoretically get to the two planes that don't have the windows, to the left and the right of that front dormer. Theoretically, that can be done. We haven't talked about a cost to do that little piece. So far, it's really just been focused on how do we do the whole perimeter of the lantern level and the spire. And at this point, that we've been discussing with Dazzle, the feasibility and the structural engineer, the feasibility of doing it with probably two cranes. So we work from one crane to cut the joints, and another crane can be doing other work as they maneuver around the building. We don't know how well that would work for actually taking some of the stone out and resetting it, but that all has to be ironed out between the engineer and the Nassau company. Great.
Tell us about mass development or grant funding program. Who the competition might be? Is this a new program or is it ongoing?
Mary would have to come on and talk about that, because I just bring the bad news.
I don't know, can people hear me if I don't come up?
Yes. Yeah.
I want to acknowledge Craig Delapenna, who is the manager of the Norwalk, principal of the Norwalk Mass Rail Trail Network, and Becky Bottomley, who engineered the whole development of rail trail here in Hardwick. Hardwick, as you may recognize, is a rural community with this very densely populated little section in Gilbertville, which I just learned turns out to be called an environmental justice section because of its census data, basically because of the lower level of its income, which is substantially below the average in the county and in the state. It's maybe below a third of it is in the state. So we have different populations even within Hardwick. The grant that Craig referred to, which he kindly wrote us a very wonderful support letter for, is a grant by legislation from the Commonwealth that wants to fund housing and jobs because it's for economic development. So what do we, as a small nonprofit organization, have to offer? You can't really put too many apartments in this space. And we're hopeful that within a year or so we might have the ability to hire a person, maybe one or two part-time jobs. Our long-term plan, of course, is that we become jobs, but all of what you've seen is accomplished by those people on the screen and many others, and all of it by volunteers. So we're funding and putting in a very unusual application, since we, the questions you have to answer say how many units of housing you're going to create. But our competition, I believe, are fine, but not too many in Hardwick. We have deep support from the Hardwick select board and from Lisa Cohen, whose husband is kind of filming us tonight. But Lisa is the secretary of the Hardwick's Master Plan Steering Committee, which is a volunteer citizens committee that helps advise the town about its long-term planning. And I think for economic development, from the perspective of what I've heard, and I don't know too much, there's several other important people that you all know here who are on this committee. They're looking at the potential for agricultural-based tourism and eco-based tourism, which is what Craig and his colleague Liz Johnson is nodding over there know about, because we bring people. Rose 32 isn't the only thing that's bringing people here. The rail trails are bringing people, and the goat farm, and people who want to, be outdoors and enjoy the beauty of our area. And the East Palm Land Trust, of course, their trails. So what we want to be is just recognize that we're on the map for those groups, and to say that this is an important resource that we can develop. If you look at the display of the photographs around you, you'll see these are build buildings. We see it's part of our mission to involve and engage and make this building of service to the local community as well as the larger regional community. So by bringing people from the regional community and also by teaching about the history and the importance of the 19th century history, which Susan Chikachi has spoken to very eloquently many times, we bring people to a new awareness of the value of this community, which has had no changes because of its lack of economic development. You're looking at a 19th century mill village when you look around you out here. And this is valuable from a National Register perspective. And people who live here need to know that. It's, whether you're struggling to pay your rent or whether you're, living off the land and as a big landowner in Harvard, it's all valuable. And this building can play a role to bring everyone together. And that's what, and Judy also spoken very eloquently about that. This is a meeting place. It's a place where people can come to us and say, we'd like to have a meeting here for whatever purpose. We'd like to have, we're going to set an acupuncture clinic here at the beginning. We don't know, we aren't clinicians and all this, but we're making this venue available. So it has a multi-dimensional role that can play a part in the social life of the community way beyond, the internet and the fact that we spend so much time alone. We want people to come out in person, enjoy the outdoors. And I don't know if I answered your question, Craig. I just want to also acknowledge Steve and his crew. Not only were they involved with this crane that you saw, they actually got up on this roof and did all the roofing repairs. And Phil mentioned that you might want to tell people how you actually manage to get up there and use the postman's chair and walk around like you're walking in there.
They did it the safe way. Other questions? I guess